Now, first off, before the video really gets started, let's make it clear that every player in the NBA is a professional athlete, and they're all great athletes compared to everyone else not playing a sport professionally. Because I mean, to get there, you have to have at least some form of good athleticism. So we're not saying that these 10 guys just have no athletic ability. All we're saying is that they're the 10 least athletic stars, near star players, or at least notable players in the league today. Players that have been able to play at a pretty high level, even though they're at a physical disadvantage to most of their peers. And I had to mention that we're looking at great or notable players, just so you aren't gonna expect to see just 10 random bench warmers in the video, because that would be boring. But let's start things with number 1 in Steph Curry. And I get it, some of you are gonna comment that Steph has great hand-eye coordination, stamina, endurance, and agility. But in terms of traditional athleticism, he's just not a standout athlete. And it's for a lot of the same reasons that I included Steve Nash in my all-time video. He's 6'3", but rarely ever dunks, and will only do it in either warm-ups or when he's completely open on the fast break. He's also not the quickest or most explosive player. And these were all the things that stopped a D1 school from signing him, what had scouts worried that he wouldn't translate well to the NBA, and also what caused him to fall back to being the 7th overall pick in the draft that year. Scouts were quoted as saying Steph was far below NBA standard in regard to explosiveness and athleticism. He's extremely small for the NBA and needs to add muscle to his upper body, even though it appears that he'll always be skinny. Body is on the small side, short arms, and a lack of great natural body strength. And while mostly everything else in his scouting report has turned out to be flat out wrong, these things about his athletic ability weren't. But I mean, that just makes how good he is and what he's been able to accomplish that much more impressive. Because even though he's a small player, he's able to run through screens to lose any defender and get open, outshoot anybody as we know, blow past defenders, all while being one of the best finishers around the rim. He worked for all of the skill that he has today to compensate for his lack of athleticism, which was just due to his genetics, which is proven by his father and his brother Dell and Seth Curry, all also not being great athletes, at around the same level as Steph is. For number 2 though, we have guys like JJ Redick, Kyle Korver, Duncan Robinson, and Joe Harris. More specifically, NBA shooters. There's a ton of them in the league, and too many to name them all, so we're just putting number 2 as guys that are some of the top ones in the league. And all of these guys are probably easily the worst athletes in the NBA. I mean, they've made and are making careers out of being guys that are called on and only really expected to be able to shoot the ball at a very high percentage in order to space the floor and get open looks when needed. And their stats show for it. Most shooters like this average usually between 10 and 15 points a game, and between 2 and 4 rebounds and assists a game. And out of all of these, I'd say Kyle Korver's had the longest career, but even in his prime is without a doubt the worst athlete of the 4. Then we move on to a more serious star player with number 3 in Kevin Durant. And okay, alright, this one's gonna be controversial, I know, but KD's not strong, infamously being the only one that couldn't bench 185 in the combine. And speaking of the combine, he also had one of the worst vertical leaps and was one of the slowest in the agility drill and the 3/4 sprint. So he wasn't fast, strong, agile, and couldn't jump high, which led to him ranking 78th overall out of the 80 combine participants in 2007. And he even said, "The draft combine's useless. I couldn't do any of those drills and I was the absolute worst at all of them. But just give me a basketball and I can outplay everyone." The player who finished best in our draft class didn't even get drafted. This isn't football where all those weights and tests mattered. And sure, he's only gotten more athletic since being a rookie, but honestly I see it hard to make an argument that he's not one of the least athletic, great players in the league. He is without a doubt one of the overall most skilled, and that's thanks to him being able to do what he can at 7 feet tall. He's definitely one of the best players, and before his injury, I had him as the best player in the league. But just because he's tall and plays like a guard doesn't make him one of the most athletic. And since that one might have gotten a few people angry, let's switch to one we can all agree on for number 4 in Nikola Jokic. And he may very well be the least athletic player in the NBA, but also one of the most talented. I mean, I know the man was trying to joke right here, but how far off do you think this was from a full-on attempt from him? I think this Reddit user put it best. Man looks like a hobbled antelope when he runs and has the vertical jump of an injured hippopotamus. But boy oh boy can that man ball. I mean, for real though, Jokic was out of shape as a kid, and when he joined his first basketball team, he couldn't even do a push-up and was drinking at least 2 liters of Coke every day. And as we saw to start this past season, he still struggles with his weight to this day. And all of these are meant to be examples that Nikola has never been one to really take great care of his body, which does play a big part in him never being as athletic as the other players around him. As we mentioned, genes play a part here, but still, could you imagine how good Jokic would be if he had taken staying in shape more seriously all of his life? Because even without being athletic, he's undoubtedly one of, if not the most all-around skilled players in the league. He's got great handles and passing for a big man, is an extremely smart player, and can score from anywhere on the court. It was just his lack of athleticism that led to him dropping down to 41st overall in the draft, but his skills that made every single team regret passing on him. Number 5, Trey Young. Alright, we gave reasons why Steph Curry was unathletic to start the video, but gave him props for his quickness, hand-eye coordination, and his agility. But I mean, Trey is just as unathletic and one step below Steph in every one of those other aspects. So while Curry was somewhat debatable on if he belonged, I really think there's no argument against putting Trey Young on this list. I mean, he's 6'1", and he's not a great defender, and while he's already a top passer and scorer, it's safe to say that his athletic ability doesn't play a huge part in how he got there. Instead, it's his court vision, basketball IQ, ability to be crafty and drive to the rim and finish over bigger defenders, along with his shooting ability that's made him one of the best young players in the world. Again, his game and body type's most comparable to Steph and Steve Nash, but even they were more athletic than he is. And just looking at him, you can obviously see that. But you probably wouldn't think that just looking at number 6 for the first time, because 6 goes to Carmelo Anthony, and this might be another debatable one here. But I'm saying Melo's not athletic, and here's why. His playstyle aside, he undoubtedly has one of the nicest jump shots ever, and has some of the slickest moves and footwork to either blow past defenders or usually to get an open jump shot. And at 35 years old for the Blazers, he basically plays the exact same as he did in his prime for the Nuggets and the Knicks. Not at as high of a level, but he does everything the same, and he's able to do that because his game has never really relied on his athletic ability, mainly because he never had much to start with. His vertical isn't impressive, he's not a fast player, rarely ever dunks the ball, he gets most of his points off jump shots and his footwork, which doesn't require him to be a super athlete. And the only part of his game that may even resemble him being that is with the intensity that he grabs rebounds at times. But I mean, I think even that has to do with him just boxing out and positioning his body extremely well rather than being strong or having to jump high. So again, this one may be controversial, but I'm sticking with it. Number 7, the Gasol brothers. Marc Gasol's on the Raptors and Pau was on the Blazers to start the year, so we can still count them as current players for the video. But of course, we're still going to be referring to how athletic or unathletic they were during their primes. Pau was never the fastest, strongest, or anything near that, but he scored over 20,000 points in the league and won 2 championships from being a traditional back-to-the-basket big man. He was definitely in the best shape on the Grizzlies, but even then, almost all of his points came from backing a big man down in the post or facing them up and hitting a shot. He wouldn't use a ton of athleticism to get the job done, and on the other end, it was why he struggled. Bigger and quicker big men would sometimes give him matchup problems because he couldn't keep up. While on the other hand, Marc Gasol was always the heavier of the two brothers and therefore the worst athlete. But because he was heavier, it helped him be better on the defensive end because he was able to hold his ground and not get pushed around by anyone else while only losing a little bit of speed that Pau had. But he still lost some, and we already established Pau didn't have much to start with. On top of that, Marc's vertical was never the best, and while he was pretty strong, we get where this is going. And at the beginning of the video, I said we're only mentioning star players, near star level players, or notable players, and this is where the notable players come in, because we're talking about Bol Bol, Taco Fall, and Boban Marjanovic, all for number 8. And this is the category of super big guys that made the league for their size, but because of their size, they are terrible athletes in every form of the word. Bol Bol doesn't fit as great in this category as the other guys do, because he's not as freakishly big as them, but he's still oversized and very unathletic because of it. And this is another prime example of where genetics come in. His father Manu was the same way, very large, but struggled to jump high and run up and down the court. And that's the case for Bol Bol. He struggles to keep up in transition, his vertical isn't high at all, and overall he's just a pretty slow player. Don't get me wrong, his skill set's still very impressive for being 7'2", but his athleticism or lack of it was one of the reasons why he fell back to the second round. He can score off the dribble and drive inside, but usually avoids contact in the paint because he also doesn't have the strength to initiate it with bigger centers. But that's just him. As for Taco and Boban, I mean, they're their games speak for themselves. Pretty much anyone ever in the league over 7'3" moves like a giraffe, and because of their height and weight that comes along with that, they're rarely ever super athletic or even athletic in general. Both men are nearly 300 pounds, Boban has a 23-inch vertical while Taco's is around 26 inches, and the reason that they both play very limited minutes is because of how slow they are in transition and how quickly they get out of breath. Number 9, Luca Doncic. Now, Luca Doncic isn't a terrible athlete, he's solid, but for him to be as great as he is while not being a great athlete is why he makes the video, and it's why he reminds a lot of people of Larry Bird, who was also not athletic by any means and without a doubt one of, if not the most unathletic superstar players of all time. But part of his game and his athleticism really do resemble Bird's. He doesn't have a quick first step, isn't explosive, and doesn't have a great vertical or anything, but through step backs, his high basketball IQ, and his natural skill for the game that won him the EuroLeague MVP at 18 is how he's already become one of the better players in the entire league. I mean, even his draft day scouting report referenced his lack of athleticism 11 separate times, and 2 times mentioned how he wasn't explosive. And now he's clearly one of the guys who's doing the most in the league with the least amount of pure athletic ability. But when speaking of Luca, number 10 also comes to mind with Klay Thompson. I mean, he's a completely different player than Luca and doesn't have as big of an arsenal on offense as he does, but he's still able to excel even while being a lackluster athlete. Don't get me wrong, he's got great lateral quickness, usually outruns players up and down the court, and he's great at keeping up with guards on defense. A good athlete in that sense, and I get just a good vertical or fast speed aren't the only things that make a great athlete, but by NBA standards, it's what we most often look at, and Klay isn't great in those departments. He rarely ever dunks on offense, isn't really quick as a ball handler, doesn't do anything super athletic on defense, even though he is a great defender, and he overall just doesn't play very athletically at all. He may be slightly better in that sense than he shows, but based on his play style, I'd say he's pretty unathletic compared to how great of a player he is. And like I said at the beginning, none of this was meant to hate on any of these players. No one on this list is a bad athlete, but I am saying that these 10 to 13 players are definitely the least athletic star players in the league today. Comment your thoughts down below, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next video.